What's up, gentlemen? It's Chris. I'm going to sit down again, have a little conversation with you, talk about not smoking weed. Something that I struggled with for an incredibly long time. Right? I started smoking weed when I was about 13 years old, maybe even 12. I can't really remember a lot of things from the age of 13 to 17 because I was smoking weed so often. I had a wax pen that I would hide in my closet. It was actually a cheeky little spot, but I would tuck it away into the pockets of a pair of pants that I had in my closet. And I did that because obviously, parents didn't want me to be smoking weed. I knew I wasn't doing the right thing, so, I hid it away and, lived honestly so much of my, end of middle school and high school years in complete shame. But that was not the last time that I smoked weed either. About 6 months ago or so, I had fully cut off a girl that I had very, very deep feelings for. I might even say that I still have some feelings for her now, if I was being completely honest with myself. But I've grown into a position now where I have more self-respect, I have higher standards, and so those are the things that keep me on the right path at this point in my life. But yeah, about 6 months or so ago when I first stopped talking to her, it was a very, very rough time. It was hard for me to get through the days. They felt so much longer, and overall they were just painful. I think everybody's had that experience, not just, in a breakup, but any time that you go through some type of trial in your life, the days, they feel long and they feel hard. And that is where I was, where I would wake up every single morning and I would look at the things that I needed to do to progress my life forward, and it just felt like I was walking through hell. And to make that easier on myself, to make the days go by faster, I would smoke a joint, right? I have a dispensary that's literally about a 2 to 3 minute drive away from my apartment. So, the first day that I smoked weed again, I had been sober for quite a while at this point, and I thought to myself, I'm just like, I have so many thoughts in my head, I feel so overwhelmed, there's this, buzzing in my temple, and, just constant thoughts of this girl popping up over and over and over again in my head. And so I thought, okay, let me just go and I'll just get one joint. I'll just smoke one joint. I idolized the idea of it in my mind, that it would just be so relaxing. I live on a lake, and so I thought, okay, I'll go, I'll get this one joint, I'll sit by the lake, and I'll just smoke a joint, and I'll just forget about my problems for a little while. I'll numb them all out, and I'll find some peace in this joint, right? Rather than finding it in myself, which would have been the right thing to do. And so I went to the dispensary, I picked up that joint, I sat down on the bench, and I began smoking it. And in that moment, I felt relief. I felt great. I wasn't thinking about the girl. I had the euphoria start to kick in. I was looking at the city lights as they reflected across the lake, and I thought, wow, okay. Relief in this moment. And what I didn't know is that I was setting myself up for months and months of pain. Right? Because rather than face the pain in that moment, get through it by facing it head on, by putting my head down and going through those challenges, knowing that on the other side of those challenges would have been a better man, I folded to temporary relief. And so I smoked that joint, and what that started was about a 2 to 3 month cycle of just smoking weed every single day, because I didn't finish that joint. And so when the morning came around, I got some things done. I felt pretty good about myself. I had a little bit of that potential relief. So I had done the bare minimum, to be quite honest with you. I went and I hit the gym, and I said, okay, I hit the gym today. At the time I was recording some, Instagram reels as well, where I was, just showing people the workouts that I was doing. And so I thought, okay, well, I did something today. I must have earned the second half of this joint. And so that was day 2. But then a few hours passed by. I think actually I woke up the next day again and did the same thing. And now it had been 2 days in a row of smoking. And so I thought, damn, the last 2 days, I still got some shit done. I still did the things that I was supposed to do. I mean, maybe I can smoke weed and it's not that big of a deal, right? And so I went back to that dispensary, and they always get you when they hit you with the, hey, we got a buy one, get one free deal today. Or, you could get this one joint for $12, but you could also get a 3-pack of these joints for $14. And so that's how it started, right? And so eventually I had found myself about a month later, and I was still smoking weed every single day, but something had changed, right? Because I no longer was smoking the weed and finding a momentary relief. It had become a dependency. I now relied on it. Because again, rather than going through and putting my head down and walking through that fire, being molded into a better version of myself through that pain and through that effort, I was numbing it out. So I was in the exact same spot. But now in order to even feel like I was stepping forward, in order to even lie to myself enough to be convinced that I was making progress in my life, I had to smoke the joint. I needed it to feel like I was doing something, like something was better. But really all I was doing was hiding, right? And so, I smoked those joints, and it got to a point where I wouldn't even go down into my parking garage. Honestly, it was disgusting what I was doing because, not just the smoking weed, it's a kind of a nasty habit when you really think about it. It's not good for your health. And if you want to be the best version of yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you cannot indulge in vices. I don't care what anybody tells you. They can tell you, oh, you need to have balance in your life. Why would I purposely poison myself for balance? Does that even make sense? I don't think so. But again, I'd gotten to the point where I didn't even want to go down to the parking garage because you slowly lose yourself more and more every single day while smoking weed. And so I just started smoking it in my bathroom. I would light up my joint and I would turn on the shower and I would blow the smoke into my shower, make sure it was nice and hot and steaming. And so not only was I dirtying myself internally, slowly losing the man that I had built up through the years, but completely abandoning the man that I wanted to be. I was then dirtying my environment as well. My apartment would smell like weed when I would come in it, and it just made weed such a, it was like wearing handcuffs is what it felt like. It was like I was cuffed to weed and I depended on it and I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything without it. I had completely lost myself to it. Right? And I think a lot of people feel that way about the vices, where it becomes a dependency, where it starts off as it's just that until it's everything that you are. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that was my experience. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't hit the gym, I couldn't edit a video, I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything without smoking weed. And that was my identity again. Just like back when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And so what do you think that did? It put me in a state of constant shame and guilt. I'm somebody who thrives off of connection and building relationships with people, and yet I couldn't even look people in the eye. When I would get into the elevator, the times that I would go down to the parking garage to smoke, I would just be hoping, I hope nobody gets in. I hope nobody gets in the elevator with me because they'll know I'm high, right? And so ask yourself, with the vices that you have, whether it's smoking weed, drinking, watching porn, if you are hiding those things from other individuals, if there are things that you don't want people to know about, especially people that you care about their opinion, because we all have those friends who, maybe they drink a shitload, you're not going to care if they know you drink, or maybe they love to smoke too, and you're not going to care. But what about the people whose opinions you truly value, right? The girl who you find attractive, your parents, whoever it might be, if they knew the things that you were doing every single day, how would you feel, right? And that was, really when I started to wake up and to realize, man, something in my life needs to change, because not only am I not making progress, right? I had looked at, the way my socials had grown and the amount of money that I was making, and I looked at my physique and I noticed that not only was I not making progress, but in some areas of my life I was absolutely deteriorating. Right? My physique didn't look its best. I looked soft. I felt weaker because I wasn't taking care of myself. Right? And again, I looked at that. I looked at the progress that I had, or in better words, hadn't made, and I knew, man, something needs to change. If I feel this shameful or this guilty that I don't even want to talk to other people, then something has to change, right? And so that really woke me up. And so what did I actually do to stop smoking weed, to progress, and to become a new individual and really just get over that hump of not smoking weed? Well, the first thing that I did was I completely changed my habits, and it was absolute hell. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that it's going to be easy. Here's a masterful trick that you can do to just stop smoking weed, cold turkey, no problem. All right, but what I did was I did make a ritual out of it. Okay, so the first thing again that I did was I completely changed my habits. So I made a deal with myself that what I was going to do was I was going to wake up at a new time. And it was ridiculously early. I wanted to challenge myself, okay? And the night before I decided to wake up at, I believe it was 4 a.m., really early, I made a ritual, like I said, out of smoking the weed. So I went over to my friend's house. He was also in a similar situation to me where we had so many conversations where we were like, I feel like I have so much potential. I feel like, if I really dedicate my life to, this concept and this business idea and to becoming this certain type of individual, then, I won't even need to smoke weed because I'll be fulfilled by my purpose, right? And we had so many conversations like that. And so, again, we went and we sat on his balcony. It was early. It was about 6 o'clock or so. And I told myself, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to make a ritual out of this. Okay, we're going to cheers over our joint. We're going to, we got some coconut waters. That's what we did because we wanted to at least have the event be as high frequency as we could. And so what we did was we sat out on the balcony together, and you can do this alone as well. And we smoked our joints, we drank our coconut water, and we just reminisced, right? First, we reminisced about all of the good times and the memories that we had made during times we had smoking weed, because we used to love going out on this balcony and smoking weed together. And so, again, we sat out there and we reminisced about all the times, years ago, the good times, not just when we had, indulged in weed, but in other vices, when times when we had gone out into the club and, times that we had hooked up with girls and all the degenerate shit that you love to do when you're a younger individual who doesn't really care about becoming the best version of themselves or like growing into, the man that you're supposed to be. And we talked about all of those. And even now, I smile, I talk shit on it, but those were good times. And what we did was we appreciated those. We didn't, suppress those memories. We didn't re-alter them in our mind and say, those were bad things and we did horrible things and yada, yada, yada. And, we didn't even say, we're never going to smoke weed again after today, right? But we recognized the good and the fun that we had, not the good, but the fun that we had in those moments, and we appreciated them and we reminisced on those. And we didn't avoid thinking about the good stuff because we were scared to go back, right? And then, we thought to ourselves or talked about it, and we said, okay, now that we've talked about our past and the good that came with it, we can let those memories go, right? That version of us, it was enjoyable in the time, and it served us at that point in our lives for different ways. Because when you're going through these things and you're doing dumb shit, it still comes with value, right? Never look at these things in your life and think of them as completely wasted, because it's not. through all of those experiences and through those trials and through those mistakes, you do learn. But you have to be wise enough to reflect on those things, right? And understand that that was a different time in your life that you are now outgrowing and moving past. And so that was the whole point, is we reflected on our growth through the stage, who we were, and then we began talking about who we now were becoming, right? And we shifted our identity in that moment. So our conversation and our thoughts, it turned from what was, and it turned to what is now and what will be. And then we spent the rest of our time just imagining what life was going to be like sober, right? And you know how things would change and how our discipline would be affected and how our relationships would get better, because all of these things are true. I promise you, if you stop smoking weed and giving that energy to a vice that no longer serves you, you will then have that energy come back to you, and it will be invested in yourself, and you will see exponential growth from moving on from that vice and grow, right? So then we put that energy immediately from who we used to be, we took it back and we put it into who we were moving into. And like I said, moved our reflective reminiscence into intentional, conscious vision of what we were going to be. So, we reflect on what we wanted in our lives, how we would hope that our relationships would develop, how our lives would develop, how our careers would develop. Right? And we started to build that image in our mind very consciously of what our life was going to look like and how it was going to change, right? And I have continued to hold that vision in my mind since that day we left that balcony, right? I know where I want to go. I know the things that I want to do. And, I've always been the type of person to look ahead in life, right? To imagine 2 to 3 years in the future, but then just focus on one day at a time. So now that I've let that past version of myself go, that was held down by weed, that used it as a crutch, now I'm, transmuting that energy and I'm turning it into something that serves me. I now have a story to tell. I can come here and I can speak on this, and I can speak in these life experiences, not with shame anymore, but with pride, knowing that it's turning me into the man who is able to be disciplined and sit in discomfort, because I've seen the alternative and I know where it leads. And I know that now, as long as I stay committed to that vision that I made in my mind, that I will grow. So this is what I'm telling you to do, right? Tonight, I want you to sit down. And, if you're still smoking weed, if you're still indulging in vices, I wouldn't encourage you to do it again. I don't necessarily know that's the best thing to do, because I think it's always, one last time. But I want you to sit down and I want you to, go through your memories. If you have physical memories that you can watch, or if you can play them in your mind, just envision, all of those things again and appreciate that chapter in your life, right? Read the story mentally. And then as you go through that, just recognize that that person that you were is no longer who you are today, right? And because of that, you no longer need weed. You no longer need alcohol or any other vice to get through the day. Because now, at this moment, you have become an individual who is stronger, who is wiser, who can sit in the discomfort and move through it, knowing that growth is on the other side of that discomfort. Right? And once you appreciate those memories and the person that you were, spend more time reflecting on the person that you are. Get out a notebook, right? I have a notebook. If it's close, it's right here. I have a notebook here, right? And what I wrote down is my name, right? So it says Christopher Ryan, and it says I am. And so these are all the I am statements of the new version of myself that I've become, right? And I used to read this every single morning. Now I feel like it's so etched into my subconscious I don't really need to, but I do feel the call, and I feel like you should always trust that inner voice in your mind to follow along with these things. But it says, I am fearless and unbelievably courageous. I am one of a kind. Nobody is like me. I am extremely magnetic, right? I am the co-creator of my reality with God, right? I am abundant and I am wealthy in all ways, right? Peace, love, and money. Okay, and those are just a few. Obviously, you see I have an entire page, but again, what that is it's a vision. And every single morning when I read those, when I used to read those, I'm not going to lie and tell you I'm doing that now, but it's here on my coffee table for a reason. When I read those things, I visualize a scene in my mind that, relates to what the statement says, right? So, for example, the one that says, I am fearless and unbelievably courageous. What I imagine in my mind is a scene where I have to be courageous, right? Something like this used to be so challenging for me, right? I used to have such a hard time sitting in front of a camera. I wanted to post YouTube videos for such a long time, and yet I wouldn't do it because I was worried about, who I was going to be seen by and what people might think of me. If you go look on my Instagram, I've posted very passionate videos. I'm spitting all over the place. And again, I used to be worried about what people would think of me. But now I am fearless and I am courageous, right? And those things, if you write them down and you visualize the person that you are supposed to be, right? Someone who's sober, who's strong, who moves through discomfort, and you continue to embody that, then you will be that person in due time, right? You are always manifesting, right? I think a lot of people think that manifestation, I'm gonna do certain affirmations, or I'm gonna just visualize in meditation, and that's how I'm going to manifest things. Manifestation works like breathing. You are always manifesting, right? You are, always creating some version of your life, non-stop. And you have to have the intention and have the vision. So now that you've let that stuff go, and you've created a new vision of your mind, the last step is that you have to embody that person, right? And that is where your conscious awareness is going to come in. You have to be an individual, again, who recognizes, right? You get that feeling, I want to smoke weed, right? And what I started to do was realizing, okay, I want to smoke weed right now. What am I escaping? When I used to smoke weed before, it was because I was escaping discomfort. So what am I wanting to smoke weed, right? So, I come home from the gym, I have a video to edit, and that's when I get hit with the urge to smoke weed, okay? Why? Because the task feels grueling and boring without the weed. And so I think to myself, okay, then I have to sit down and I have to do this video right now without smoking weed. And as you, again, move through that discomfort, you embody the individual who you visualize, and just like that, you move one step closer to being that man. Or, better off, you are that man in that moment, and again, through time, you will start to physically, manifest the things that man has, right? The body, the physique, the mindset, the material things, they will come to you. And that's something that's super important. I think one last thing that I'll leave you off with is, again, if you're ever struggling with it, before you go and purchase the joint, before you go out with your friends, again, take a moment of time to close your eyes and sit and just visualize the life again that you desire. Because you are choosing between being the old version of yourself and walking one path, and being the version of yourself who you could be and walking that path. And so you close your eyes, you visualize those things. Say if you're somebody who really wants to get in shape, you want to get a six-pack, but your buddies keep inviting you out to drink, or since weed is kind of the topic of this video, say you really, really want to smoke a joint, but that's going to lead you to eating junk food or not hitting the gym, oversleeping the next day. When you feel that urge, again, sit in that moment. I want you to visualize yourself with the physique that you've always imagined yourself having, with the six-pack abs, looking yourself in the mirror and feel the emotions of just like how proud you are, right? Because I didn't smoke weed, and instead I stuck through and I did what I had to do to be that man, right? And really visualize that. Feel the emotions of being that person. See the partner of your dreams with you, and she appreciates the man that you are and the physique that you have. And when you open your eyes, make the choice then. Do I want to go smoke the joint? Do I want to go to the club with my buddies, or would I rather have that? Right? And when you do that, and if you fully embody the emotions and you visualize with intention, I promise you the choice will be easy every single time. You will choose to be the man who has those things, who looks in the mirror, who's proud of what he looks like, and is proud of who he is. Okay. So, that is all that I have to say today. Just like before, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, whatever you want to do. I'm going to leave a Calendly link in the bio. Right, if you want help with becoming the man that you are supposed to be, embodying that version, if that's something that you've struggled with for way too long, and you know and you feel called to become a better version of yourself, but you just need a little bit more structure, you just need a little bit more guidance and some accountability, click the Calendly link in my bio, book a call with me. We can talk one-on-one about how I might be able to help you.